Parenting is one process for which we do not have any training at all. Absolutely no training, but all of us become parents, including myself. I'm also a parent. So we think that we have the maternal instinct and the paternal instinct to be able to do that automatically. And the other problem in the current situation is often we do not have in the previous generation. For example, if I have to remember my grandparents, I'm sure my grandmother would have mothered and looked after and parented, and she would have seen her mother parenting, and she would have parented to a certain extent her brothers and sisters before she became a parent herself. And that would have been a joint family, and she would have seen either her aunt or other people in the family or a grandmother parenting other children. So they have first-hand experience of how to parent and how not to parent. And they also have some hands-on experience where they are not the total parent, but they have some experience on caring and disciplining and looking after and teaching before they become a parent on their own terms. So those experiences are not available to us today. So your own parenting style, because you as a person has grown up very differently. And then you would always remember how your parents parented you. And that would influence your own parental style plus your own personality. And then, of course, the culture in which you grew up, the culture in which you grew up, and of course, the sort of other things which your child is growing, that also. So you would have learned a lot about how to parent. So, for example, if you grew up in a village, that sort of a parenting has a different influence on you if you grew up in a city and had a very different sort of. And if you grew up in a nuclear family rather than a joint family. So everything makes a lot of difference. Or if somebody grew up in a hostel, boarding school, their parenting style would be very different than a person who grew up at home. So these are very, very important. And this is a past where it influences our present, and that present influences the future of your children. And this is something which we need to understand. If we do not become aware of it and we just do parenting because we think that we know, it's not going to be for the best for the child. There are different types of parenting style. How much of control you provide, how much of warmth or acceptance you provide. So these are two different things, and they interact with each other. So the control and the warmth. And the best one is called the authoritative one, where the person controls very fairly, at the same time accepting, but provides limits and disciplines, but everything is fair, explains things, is consistent. Even if there is strictness at home, there are lots of things maybe no, but there is a fairness in everything. On the other hand, somebody could be very controlling and not very, very, showing a lot of acceptance and to the individuality of the child, what we say authoritarian. And many of you may say that, doctor, actually our parents, I wouldn't dare to talk against my father. So he was such an authoritarian. But what you need to understand is the parenting in those days was not restricted only to your father. Somebody else would have been there. So you would have had an opportunity to have other figures around you who were not authoritative, but only authoritarian, but authoritative. And then, of course, there are things like very permissive, no control at all, no discipline at all. So you allow everything, the children rule the rest, roost. And the other one is very neglectful. Unless somebody is in a very, very different situation, I often do not find Indian parents as and definitely not in this crowd, as very neglectful parents, where the child is on its own, neither is it accepted or provided warmth or not control. Permissive, there is no control at all. The children do whatever they want. And we would find that there is a mixture of everything, all the four, in all of us. So it is not that only one is there all the time. Depending upon the situation, we become, permissive or authoritative, authoritarian. But what is important is, what is your more than 50% of your parenting style? And that is something, in today's context, this has become very important, and you need to sort of examine yourself what sort of a parent you are, because that sort of helps you to understand that the children, the way you parent, it will always affect the way your children deal with emotions or their social skills or the way they feel confident about themselves. The long and short of it is only what I have written at the lower one. I have a son, I have only one child, or I have only one daughter, or I have only one son and one daughter. I have to somehow make them successful in this life. That's my goal. Versus, you need to make them help them to become mature persons. If you do that, a lot of other things would sort of settle.